Our keynote speaker today is somebody who I know many of you may know, and every so often an idea comes around that is a game changer, that after we hear it and understand it, we never see the world quite the same ever again. And in that way, an idea serves as what Richard Dawkins calls a meme. Like genetic material, a meme moves through the human ecosystem and changes our worldview. And I think there's no question that one of those powerful memes of our time is this notion of biomimicry. The idea that the natural world has been doing R&D for 3.8 billion years, refining responses to environments in a way that we, as a very recent species, have only begun to understand. And the idea of biomimicry is to learn the lessons of nature, understand how nature has designed itself in response to environmental conditions, and design our world accordingly. This is a very powerful idea that has had an enormous impact on design education in the areas of material science and product design, and has more recently been moving up to the scale of the landscape and cities. And we are very fortunate to have as our keynote speaker today the person who really is the visionary behind biomimicry, Janine Benyus. If you haven't had a chance yet to buy her book or don't own it, I highly recommend it. It's still available out in the lobby. She is a biologist, the co-founder of Biomimicry 3.8, which I think refers to that 3.8 billion years. She's an innovation consultant, author of 6 books. I think has been on TED Talks at least twice, has given hundreds of talks about this subject. Biomimicry 3.8 is both a for-profit and a non-profit that both consults on biomimicry-based innovations, trains people to do biomimetic work, and develops biomimicry curricula for educators. In our university, for example, we have been doing studios, design studios with biologists, and have found our biological colleagues, particularly functional biologists who work at sort of the scale that is similar to the way in which at the scale designers work, are profoundly insightful and make some of the best reviewers we've ever found. So I would encourage all of you, if you don't know a biologist, get to know one. They are great people. So Janine has been recognized for this work, Time Magazine's Hero for the Planet Award in 2008. She won the United Nations Environment Programme's Champion of the Earth for Science and Technology in 2009. She won the Rachel Carson Environmental Ethics Award more recently, and she's going to talk to us this morning about cities that function like forests. So please welcome Janine Benyus. Janine.
Hello, it is so wonderful to be here. There's the real champion of the earth, right there. Yeats said that the world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper. And you have sharpened our senses. This is an amazing community I've been wanting to interact with. Thank you, Shannon, Jack, Chris Allen, for getting me here. I feel like I thought I was coming to a conference. I didn't realize it was a community, and it is very much so. And it's a community of people practicing what is uniquely human, which is our ability to tell stories. We're a storytelling animal. That's what makes us different. We can't fly like that, but boy, we can tell stories. And we can project into the future. If we have good enough senses, we can see where we've come from, we can project into the future, and that enables us to choose. You know Jared Diamond, who wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel and wrote Collapse. When he was writing Collapse, I asked him, are there any civilizations that have gotten to the point of collapse and have been able to pull back? And what what did they have in common? He said, oh yeah, yeah. He said, a lot of them were island nations, and the important thing was that someone on the island was able to go out to the edges of the island and come back and say, that's all there is. They were able to see and understand where they live. And that's what you guys are involved in. That's what geodesign helps us to do. So thank you. I'm lucky enough to live in a place that makes me swoon. This is my view. Actually, this is from the air, but I'm in the Bitterroot Valley in western Montana. This is what helps me see. I happen to live on the edge of the largest contiguous wilderness in the lower 48. And so it's what we call reference habitat. It is by no means completely untouched, but it is so healthy back there, deep time healthy. And when I walk back there, I see what we could be with a lot of humility, because we have a lot to learn. This is the pond next to my house that I write about in the book. To be surrounded by this kind of beauty and this kind of relatively intact, complex, adaptive system this is my university. This is my house. I can walk to a park. It's good. In Montana, we call potholes opportunities for rainfall infiltration. So, a sustainable world already exists, okay? It's right outside, even outside right here. So what the question I want to ask today is, what would it take for this city not to look like that forest, but to function like it? Because biomimicry is about asking, how does nature function? And then trying to emulate that function, performance. Imagine if this performed like this. And I want to get beyond metaphor. We've been talking about buildings as trees and cities as forests for a long time. It's time to get the metrics in place. So it's a conscious emulation of this time-tested wisdom. Just a few reminders that biomimicry is not really about what we can extract. It's not bioutilization or what we can harvest or what we can domesticate. It's not bioassisted. It's literally about what we can learn. It's not so much about learning about your place, but learning from it. That's a profound change. It realizes that no matter where you live, you're not the first on that piece of ground to seek shelter or to create building materials. Here's our cement factory, here's nature's. Or to live in community. Or to design structures that flow. To desalinate. To gather moisture from fog. This little guy in the Namibian desert gathers moisture from fog 10 times better than our fog catching nets. Some of these are now being mimicked. To cope with waste. First time I spoke at Google, they had a 40-foot screen, and this was my opening slide, and now they refer to me as the dung woman. To farm. We're not the first to weather storms. Suffer high heat, drought, wind. Look at those trees. Look at that shape. Look at that form. We're not the first to be battered stronger by hurricanes. This is the Seven Sisters oak. It's a live oak near Lake Pontchartrain. During Katrina on St. Charles Street, there were over 740 live oaks. Only 4 died. This is a 1,500-year-old tree. It's seen a few hurricanes. It's got spiraling in its trunk so that it can flex. It's got spiraling in all its branches. Its leaves are designed to go with flow and create a Fibonacci sequence, which is the least friction that wind can go through a substance. It is designed to drop some of those branches and to be a pulse of nutrient to that ecosystem. It's designed with self-sacrificial layers. Perhaps what you may not know about those 740 trees that did not die, underneath the ground, the roots of live oaks are entwined with other roots, and in some cases even grafted together. So that when a hurricane hits a live oak, it doesn't hit it alone. It hits an entire community of live oak. It says something about foundations, our pure single foundations. So this is what we ask. What would nature do here? Here is so key, because life is not, the planet is not monolithic. It's created of, it's little places with very particular adaptations to those places. What wouldn't nature do here is just as important a question. Why and why not is when we begin to see nature as mentor. This is Václav Havel, one of my heroes. I'm Slovak. And he talks about the fact that we need to draw our standards from the natural world. And in biomimicry, we've talked a lot about nature as model. So mimicking a beetle's bumps for gathering fog. I want to talk today about nature as measure, about drawing our standards from the natural world. And one of the standards, you know, at a scientific meeting, I would be taken off now with a hook, because I'm going to talk very about generosity, because I think ecosystems are generous, and I'll explain why. They create more and more and more opportunities for life, right? I mean, this tree, for instance, every single leaf is another niche. They're ecosystem engineers, and they're actually creating more opportunities for life. And the organisms that live on each of those leaves create more opportunities for life. There's this continual, it's amazing, with the same flow of abundant energy and the same flow of limited materials, more and more opportunities for life. Generosity. This is Adam Neiman, who's done this work. The one on the left is all the water, fresh ice, salt, the volume of all the water on Earth compared to the volume of the Earth. And on the right, it's all the atmosphere we can breathe compared to the volume of the Earth. What's really amazing is that when life started 3.8 billion years ago, this was a very hostile place. It wasn't lush. It wasn't an Eden as it is now. Life has made of this place an Eden because it's sweetened the water and it's cleared the air, creating a cocktail of gases that is perfect for us to breathe. Those ecosystem services that we're starting to talk about that come for free, we not only have to thank the natural world for them, we not only have to value them, I submit that we have to become producers of ecosystem services ourselves. Life creates conditions conducive to life. Otherwise, if you're an organism that doesn't learn how to do this, you eventually are replaced by an organism that does. Because organisms can't take care of their offspring 10,000 generations from now. They have to take care of the place that's going to take care of their offspring. So they learn. The system learns how to create conditions conducive to life, and that equals producing ecosystem services, not just for themselves, but for their downstream, for the biosphere. So can a city be generous in this way? This is Mannahatta, you know, the New York project. This is when the Dutch sailed up. And this is now. Now, which one gives back? I mean, I live near that wilderness, and my dream is that when I fly now into the city and I fly over the wilderness, I look down and I see fragrant air, cool temperatures, sparkling water, biodiversity, and then the minute I hit a city, I don't expect that anymore. So my dream is that that city will be functionally indistinguishable from the wild land next door. And I don't think we're going to task ourselves with that until we have metrics. We've been working, Chip Crawford's here, and he used to be the planning head at HOK, and he hired us at Biomimicry 3.8 to, how do you apply biomimicry to cities? And one of the first things we did was talk about ecological performance standards. So what we said was, let's go to the wildland next door, and let's get the metrics. How much clean water does it produce each year? How much soil does it build? How much pollination happens? how much biodiversity is supported, how much wildlife is able to pass, how much carbon is sequestered. And all the ecosystem services, not just carbon and water and energy, all of them. And then say, you know, right next door to you, this is happening, so city, meet it or exceed it. These are aspirational goals, aspirational vows is what they are now. And, you know, when you think about what we've asked our cities to do, we're starting to get there. With God, you know, the things I heard this entire conference are so outrageous. This modeling that you're able to do now, this procedural modeling is just, these eventually will be able to be counted. We'll be able to set metrics for them. We'll be able to design into them, and we'll be able to have sensors and citizen scientists that do the ecological monitoring. This will be the new e-governance dashboard. We'll say to a city, you know, the wildland next door stores X gallons of water in a storm, and so must you. We're doing pretty good with stormwater now. We're starting to get to these kinds of metrics. But we'll also talk about albedo, tons per acre of carbon sequestration, capturing pollutants, cycling of nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, at the same levels or exceeding the wildland next door, evapotranspiration, things that we're currently not looking at. How much soil is your building building? Fertility rates, degrees of cooling. What's neat about this is that because it's happening in the wildland next door, no one can say it's impossible. It creates a framework. When we've worked with this, it's amazing. Landscape architects are the ones that first go, yay, because it's so instant. You can say, oh my gosh, now I know what to do. I want this green roof to function in the following ways. Oh, and I have to do pollination. Great, I'll put a hive on it. Things we wouldn't have asked ourselves to do, right? They really, really get it. But, and you can design into it. You can suddenly have landscapes that function to meet the city's needs. And got it, you know, if Boston fights against Chicago about this, I can't wait, right? Because it's going to be a city that does this, that is generous, that produces ecosystem services. It's going to be one that's going to be great to live in. But you're going to be proud of this, right? And every design that you do, you're going to try to meet all these ecosystem services. Because the way we're looking at it is not that you just plant plants in order to do this, but that your infrastructure and your ecostructure together contribute to meeting these metrics. So you've got a per acre metric, and every block, when you move in and you're going to design on that block, your buildings have part of the ecological weight to carry, and your landscapes have part of the ecological weight. So your building has to sequester carbon, literally. So that might say, well, if I'm making this out of concrete, maybe I'll make it out of a concrete like Calera's concrete that's based on coral reefs, the recipe of coral reefs, and it sequesters CO2 rather than emitting it, sequesters it in the concrete. You would have a reason for that design, right? So buildings, eco and infrastructure contribute to this. Bank of America building already is releasing air 3 times cleaner than it comes in. So it's already meeting some of those metrics. This is just a way, this aspirational goal, to get all of the buildings doing it. Let me give you a few examples. Lavasa, India, again working with Chip. Chip, where are you? Are you here? Here he is, right there. He's CC. He's a crazy client. You need crazy clients to do this kind of stuff. In fact, we need a pilot study. We need a pilot city for ecological performance standards. We really do. Anyway, Chip was working on Lavasa, which is a hill town near Pune in India, and asked us to come in. And we were just pretty much shocked by this place. 8,000 acres. First of all, there's 9 meters of rain. That's 27 feet of rain, and it comes in 3 months. And then it's absolutely dry the rest of the year. Because it's so hilly, obviously, erosion is a huge problem. So, well, lucky for us, one of the ecological hotspots, the Western Ghats, is right next door, and it's been heavily studied. So we were able to find it in the biological literature. We were able to find these baselines. What does health mean? Guess what we found about erosion? 0 erosion during monsoons. I know it's a crazy aspirational goal, especially when you're building into something like this, and you're cutting foundations like that, and at certain times of year, that lake would run red, right, Chip? So the question becomes, how do we get to 0 erosion, right? So you start to look at how it's done. It's not just what's done, but how it's done. So you start to look at the fact that, there's many, many layers. This moist deciduous forest is a very particular kind of structural canopy. And it breaks the rainwater. That's some of what happens. So they talked about doing, awnings and having things that would break that as well as just covering the landscape at all times, right? And then we found this interesting critter. This is an ant, a harvester ant mound. It's giant there, but it's about this big. Made of dirt, but it is out in the open. The monsoons hit it, and that dirt doesn't dissolve away, and part of it is because it goes down in a sinuous way. So that gave us an idea, a design principle to emulate, right? That we shouldn't have roads going straight down, that perhaps we should slow them, right? Perhaps we should have drip tips like a lot of the leaves, which get the water off quickly and then can gather it somewhere. Perhaps we should do what these trees do, which is called hydraulic redistribution. And what happens is during these huge rains, they take their shallow roots, take in the rainwater, push it down the root, not up the root, down the root, and bank it in the soil. And then during the dry periods, it pulls it up, out to the soil, out to the shallow roots, and waters. Hydraulic redistribution for the dry season. This was really interesting. We found that 20 to 30% of the water flow is during the monsoon, because of the darkness of the moist deciduous forest canopy and because of the turbulent winds, it turns that water into water vapor that gets volleyed up to the clouds, and that becomes the monsoonal engine that waters inland India. That's a generous forest. How do we make our rooftops play with wind in the same way, albedo in the same way, to try to replicate that hydro function? These are questions we haven't asked ourselves. Langfang, China, another project with HOK. And this was really fun to see the first speaker. What's his name? I'm sorry, what's his? Kanjun. Because I felt like we had almost worked side by side. We were working in Langfang, which is a city in between Beijing and Beijing. And it's on the North China Plain. Oh, by the way, the Lavasa, India thing had not had native vegetation on it for 400 years. It was pretty beat up. So we were trying to mimic something that was not there. This hasn't had the native deciduous forest on it for 4,000, North China Plain. So talk about landscape amnesia. What was happening was the water table was dropping by 1.5 meters every year. The land in Langfang was subsiding. There was such a draw on fossil water, it was incredible. And the people were already meeting UN water scarcity measures. And yet, there were 3 giant rivers crashing through, channelized. So we worked with hydrologists. We found paleochannels that showed us how that water used to go across that landscape. We decided that it had a green belt around it, but that we should put a green fabric into it and blueways, put canals back in there. And also soften those river edges, of course. Let flooded forests happen like they used to. Have forest farms along pedestrian pathways. Have all that multifunctionality that comes with restoring function, with restoring the aquifer. Our goal here was to say to them, they're one of the cities that is going to take the, you know, China's being plumbed from the south to the north, right? So the Three Gorges Dam was created, you know, the Yangtze River is backed up, and then that water is being piped up to cities like this. Cities like Langfang that have enough water, albeit very polluted at this point, some of it from Beijing. We said to them, turn away the teat, turn away the water. Be the first city in China to turn away the water. We proved that they could be water self-reliant. We didn't have the tools that you guys are talking about this morning, where we could show every design decision and its impact on water storage, sponging and slow, you know, the sinking and the slowing and the sinking and the spread, the re-release. We weren't able to show that. Boy, I wish we had had your tools. We'll see. It's a master plan. We'll see if they put it into place. So Wes Jackson asks us, how do we become native to our places again? And each place, as we saw at the beginning of this conference, has its own story, cultural and ecological. We call it a genius of the place. We do this process, genius of place process, where we go in and first we look for the keys to resilience in a place. We look for the ecological story of the place. And it's amazing, people developing don't really know the story. We look for what makes it tick, the dynamics. My place used to have fire every 7 to 15 years. That's a big story. That's what makes it tick. We also look for its Achilles heel. What are the key slow variables that will flip it into another regime? Drop by drop. One of these like death by 1,000 cuts. We try to see where that cliff would be and avoid it. And then we look at a survey of local organisms. We look for the harvester ant. We say, how are organisms meeting their functional needs here? How are they sheltering? How are they caching water? And it changes from place to place. Caching water in Vermont is very different than caching water in Phoenix. So we look at functions that the city needs, and then we look for organisms across taxa. We look at plants, we look at animals, we look at insects, fungi. We start to look for patterns. We wind up with design principles for the whole project based on deep patterns of those organisms in place. And then, if the client will have us, we do this ecological performance standards, where we get these metrics. Sometimes it's 20 years. Give 20 years to move into these metrics. Our dream is to map those ecological performance standards for the globe. There's 18 biomes, and then within that, we love to work at the level of ecological land types, which is those smaller puzzle pieces within. At least for the major cities, we would love to map those. Where we would start, the kind of data we would start with here in the United States. I used to work for the Forest Service for years. I wrote a book for them, actually. These are long-term ecological research sites. You probably know about them. There's also the NEON network. Up to 50 years of long-term ecological research. But the key is that to begin that ecological, a place like Hubbard Brook is a watershed in which the Forest Service will manipulate that watershed to see what happens to ecosystem services. But what they have to do first is baseline it. So they know what healthy is, they'll do a clear cut, they'll do a fertilization, and then they'll be able to compare. So we've got baseline data. It's not going to be easy to get, but I'm talking to wizards, so we can do that. And they're beginning to help us really understand these places in a very, very deep, quantified way. We talk about fitting in on this planet, on this home that is ours, but not ours alone. We talk about it, and now it's time to actually do it. And we can either do it by looking inside our own heads and trying things that might be gigantic mistakes, or we can walk outside and sort of ask for directions. And I actually think that this layer of biological intelligence is something that everyone should be able to access at the moment of creation. Whether you're designing a product or you're designing a city, you should be able to get nature's best practices. The 3.8 billion years of R&D that came before you, you should be able to see those patterns and those processes so that you have something to emulate and so that you have a standard to design into. Actually, it's kind of hard right now to find that information. We ask designers and the people we work with, make it a habit, every decision and every design, start with how would nature solve this here? And people do that, but then they say, you know, I'm not a biologist. And I don't know the answer to that, because we've been trained in two different streams. So we think just like a GIS, we need a BIS. And believe it or not, we've started one, and we don't have any maps on it. AskNature, this is the 1.0, we started it in 2008. And our goal, kind of Google us, is to organize all biological information by design and engineering function. So you can type in, how does nature desalinate? And up will come examples of the kidneys of seabirds and nasal glands and mangrove membranes, things that you can then mimic, okay, in product design and also process, and also on an ecosystem level. So check it out if you haven't seen it. It's asknature.org. It's public domain. And it's through our institute. It's through our nonprofit. We have a for-profit and a nonprofit. And this is, it's the only place right now where biological strategies are organized in this way. But I'm, chagrined to say that there's not a map on this site where if you're designing in Phoenix, you can click on Phoenix and all the organisms in Phoenix can come and tell you how to do your work. So we need to do that. We need to do a lot of stuff. We're launching 1.5 right now, a little cleaner design. We're talking a lot with our users. But AskNature 2.0 is what we want to move into. And I do think that it should be geolocated. I think that makes all the sense in the world. We're also trying to, this is a product design example, but imagine this as a GIS or a geodesign example. So what we have now up there is biological strategies. And what we want to do is just to be able to very quickly give designers the design principle. This is for the tubercles on a humpback whale's flippers. Reduces drag by 32% when put on an airplane wing. 32%. Amazing. So the design principle, application ideas, and then a CAD download, right? A 3D model so that you can put those tubercles right on your design of your wind turbine instantly and test it right in silico. So imagine these geographic ideas with your software, right? What would be the digital design blueprints, right? What would be the web maps that would come about? What would be with the procedural modeling, where people can start to actually say, okay, I'm going to build a building that gathers fog, and I'm going to skin all the buildings in San Francisco with fog gathering skin. How much could I gather, right? We also have something called life's principles that, just like there are things that that organisms do that are very particular to their places, there's something else that's even more profound in some ways, and that is, what do all organisms have in common? Because that's the operating manual to being an earthling. Things like they all do chemistry in water, not inorganic solvents, They all build with a very small subset of the periodic table. And there are ecosystem level lessons and patterns like that as well. So that's where we're going with AskNature. If you want to know more about this work, there's a downloadable Genius of Biome, which is the northeastern part of the country, and we did it with HOK, and it's online. It's on their site. You can find it, Genius of Biome, or just Google it. So again, this is our dream. We need a pilot city to try this on. And I'm just going to, I only have a few seconds here left, a few moments. I want to talk again about this storytelling animal. Because what people often say, probably not this audience, because you are bullish on us, think that we can make it. And I do too. I think we can go through this evolutionary knothole. I don't think every species is going to make it, but I'm hoping we will bloom on the other side. And I'm hoping we'll be a welcome species when we get there. And a welcome species, the difference between an invasive and a native species, and one that gets naturalized, a new species that gets naturalized in an ecosystem is one that contributes to the ecosystem. So we have to figure this out, right? A lot of people tell me that they think that it's not in our nature to play this way on planet Earth. And I don't quite believe that. I mean, this is a pretty amazing organism right here. You know, it's a pretty amazing organism. What we forget is that we are nature. There is no separation. And we are not immune to nature's rule sets. We have to put nature's rule sets in every single thing we design. The other thing I'll say is that we are the other uniquely human thing, or we're one of the youngest species on the planet. We're only 200,000 years old. 3.8 billion, 200,000 for Homo sapiens sapiens. So no wonder we're making some mistakes. The other thing to remember, kind of settle ourselves down and remember, we live on a competent planet. Yes, she is frayed right now, but she is resilient. She is not endlessly resilient. But we live on a competent planet, and we are surrounded by competent elders. 200,000 years old, it's nothing. It's nothing. I mean, the age of the Earth was a calendar year. The last 60 seconds of the year has been all of recorded history. In this room, I think the reason you're here at a Geodesign conference is a certain reverence that you have for those reference habitats and those elders, and a desire to understand where you live, but also to understand how to live there in a way that makes of this place an Eden. So it's time for us to learn our way home. Maybe it's one of those informal networks, right? Those informal paths. Let's cut across the park, right? With our eyes open. I want to thank you guys so much for sharpening our senses and creating the tools in which nature's rule sets can be embedded. Once nature's best practices are embedded in the tools we use every day to design, then we will begin to design with nature, from nature, in nature. So, thank you, and I can't wait to play with you in some way. Thanks.
Thank you, Janine. Jack? You want to join us up on the couch here? Jack? Wow. Janine, every time I hear you, it's just amazing.
Well, it was fun because I got to do something new for you guys.
Have a seat.
I'm waiting for this. I'm waiting for the man.
I want to play with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I was going to say, so Jack, how do we do this? How do we embed these rules?
I don't know.
Into GIS?
She knows better than us.
I
What's
don't,
your
have not met the technical platform yet, though. I mean, seriously, I came a day early, which I never do, to a conference. You know, you know how it is with travel. You don't.
Yes.
And I don't want to leave that place very often. So, but I came and I learned so much, and I'm more convinced now, seeing your, and believe me, I'm a baby learning your stuff, but I think there's a way to do it.
Yes.
I do, but you have to help me understand the technology of it. You know, I've got to kind of got this concept, and I can research the rule sets. You know, but I don't know where to put them and how to put them and how to display them. You know.
That's okay.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if we could bet in all those parametric rules that we just saw Eric and his team demonstrate, had all of your knowledge and biomimetic knowledge embedded into it, it would be transformative. Absolutely transformative.
I mean, you've been searching for GIS for a long time.
I know.
I mean, that's the way I look at this. I mean,
That's right.
I'm not actually joking.
No, you're right.
I think intuitively, you want to invent exactly what our discipline has been working on for years, and put the geodesign layer on top of it, which you know, allows us to design with nature, exactly as you said.
Yeah.
So the mechanics of it, frankly, are quite crude compared to the rich diversity and complexity of nature. I mean, they're not like your mind is imagining. So we sort of approximate modeling geographic phenomena, including biological phenomena and social phenomena, into these computational environments. We just sort of evolve it.
Yeah.
And it's been evolving for about 50 years. Carl Steinitz was one of the inventors of it right here. And there were a number of other theoreticians that looked at trying to create abstractions of reality, geographic reality, in these digital forms. And different formats, different data models, different tools that were invented on those abstractions have allowed us to sort of pretend like we can actually model reality. But the reality is very complicated. Yeah. My God.
Oh, my God.
You know, and one of the risks is that we actually believe that we can model it correctly or exactly. I mean, the agent-based modeling or the water resource modeling, okay, plus or minus a couple 100%, we get in the ballpark. Wait a minute, that's not the beauty and the complexity of nature as you are experiencing in Montana or elsewhere. So we do our best. And I think, frankly, the relationship, if we make this work, not if we, when we make this work, we'll have to co-evolve your world with what the technology actually enables. And I think we're humans. We can do this. So it's been co-evolving for a long time. Your perceptions and energy and insights into how nature works, and just even the concept of it, like you said, Tom, could very much empower how this evolves.
Right. And you know, there's so much content on AskNature, but you're right, Janine, it needs to get geolocated. So I mean,
that's simple.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
you both need each other.
I mean, that concept of just georeferencing your databases is trivial.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is the thing that Eric showed this morning, which is embedding, using procedural thinking, every aspect of nature, and putting it in such a way that we could actually propose things and understand the implications of those proposals as we sort of change the world.
Yeah, and then it's, you know, I was in D.C. and they were like cutting the ribbon on their last, you know, million square foot green roof.
Yes.
And the head of the DEQ said to me, "To what end?"
Yes.
You know? and I had been talking about this, and he said, if I had a metric that said to me, I got to cool this much, I got to do, he said, then I know why I'm cutting that ribbon, and I know how close I'm getting to us meeting or exceeding. And then everything has a framework, So it seems really obvious, and I think getting those metrics is not going to be that difficult. And then I think the tools that you're talking about will also, get better and better at showing us, the 50th green roof finally brought us 1 degree cooler, or,
right.
But the whole time I've been talking about this, I didn't realize that you had tools that could actually help us monitor
Yes.
this stuff. Well, not just monitor and see whether we did it or not, but before it's real.
Change.
Design.
Before it's real, right? And make sure that when we build it, we're pretty close to understanding that it's going to do what we want it to
Or
do.
approximating it.
Yeah.
I again am scared that we, in these digital abstractions, pretend like we know what we're doing in the complexity of nature. That I don't say that very often because it's my business, But it is scary when you move into the biological and the social domains, that we pretend like we actually know how it really is.
Yeah.
We just we don't even know it on our human body. I mean, we know so very little
Right, I know.
on the complexity and relationships and patterns of it. And you're dealing with orders and orders and orders of magnitude.
Well,
greater
it
when
keeps
talk about
you humble,
ecology.
and I'm hearing humility, from you, and I think that is such a key sort of core value for this work, because it's the same with us. When we're looking for patterns in the natural world, are we really seeing the pattern? We have to do all kinds. Wes Jackson, again, a fave of mine, he calls it the ignorance-based worldview. He says, just remember you're billions of times more ignorant than you are knowledgeable. And if you remember that, he wants to have an ignorance conference, and he's going to be the keynote speaker. And he said, if you remember that, then you will make sure and start small, pilot small. Always check your work. Check for pray for second chances. Look for exits. So I think that there's humility I'm hearing in you. Like, let's try it and then ground truth it.
Yeah, try it. And I mean, my whole life has been a try a little bit and see if it works. If it works, then do a little more of it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then back away.
Right.
And I mean, that's how Esri was actually built, is try a little. If it doesn't work with real people, real end users, then back away.
That's how nature works.
And that's the way actually how nature works.
No, exactly.
So speaking about a city, let's take Singapore.
Okay.
I mean, Singapore just signed a relationship with us to do a collaboration.
Okay.
They're going to take Eric. I think is Eric here?
Eric
Yeah.
Whitner.
You want to explain it, or should I explain it?
You have the vision. I'm just the
Just the
It's really
implement.
sick.
Yeah.
Humility.
So they have 172,000 buildings in Singapore. So they're going to take each building over the next 6 months and procedurally enter it into a smart city database.
Okay.
So as you saw this morning with parameters,
That's a
like
big
what
deal.
is the runoff of this building, what is the sewer flow from this building, what is the traffic generated from this building. So it's not just the envelope and its textures, but the characteristics of each building from a performance
How it
perspective.
performs, yeah.
How it performs. And we want to do the same thing with the trees of Singapore. Have you ever been to Singapore?
I have not. No.
It's like a garden city.
Oh, it is.
It's just unbelievable.
wow.
You get off the plane and you move into a green paradise. There's everything everywhere, up and down the buildings and
Really?
inside, outside. It's like moving into a humid, beautiful, luxurious space.
Oh my
I always
gosh.
think I mean, it's hot there. That's the only problem.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful.
Wow.
So we want to enter in the plants in the same way.
Okay.
But their vision is that if they build this intelligent city, they will take City Engine and give it to all of the architects, many of whom are public servants, and they will design buildings. Each building that they put into the into this database, they can evaluate quickly in terms of increased impacts: water runoff, water usage, sewer flow, traffic flow, air pollution, solar glare, shade analysis, different sorts of things. That's very practical for them.
Yeah.
So imagine, Eric and I went there. There's a room that's probably 4 times the size, a model, about 3 or 4 times the size of this floor, of the whole city. And every building is in this model.
Wow.
So
cool.
citizens walk around it, and you can pull a building out and put a new building in. So what they're thinking about is having the same kind of thing digitally, that you could drop a new building in and understand immediately, let everybody understand through things like web scenes and so on in the city. Every citizen can look at it. They could evaluate all the characteristics of this proposal with the notion that that will change the conversation
Of course
between developers, architects, and regulatory people who represent the people. So that the whole conversation changes.
But could it be the first city that you're looking for? To
Exactly my point. I wanted to get the concept across, but if we brought in your whole environment into this and said this is the model city. Singapore thinks of them as the model city of the future because of their density and limited resources. So they're
ready to take this next step.
They've taken the next step.
It's always... And this next step of maybe adding some more of these ecosystem services to their criteria list of success.
And they are so wired into your philosophy and insight. It'll be remarkable.
Cool.
So let's make that a project.
It's done.
Okay.
So you've seen it here, everybody.
It's done. Great.
Okay.
GIS meets BIS, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, this is great.
Exactly.
An historic moment, I think. This is very powerful.
It is powerful. You're great, you know.
Thank you, Jack.
Yes,
Jack, I've been before I came. I went and I watched all the videos for all the conferences, and I saw you walking around, and I said, I like him. I like him. You know why?
Heartthrob. Really.
You know why? Because I can feel you thinking on stage. I can feel you literally. I can see you. You know, really, and you know, your whole look at this as a modality, you know, the fact that this is a new sense, right? It is. It's a crystal ball. It's a lot of things. It's also an agent of natural selection. You know, how natural selection works is every generation, you got all these wild ideas. That's not all it is. It's not just variety. The most important thing is a rigorous selection process.
It'll be an element of evolution, is my sense of it.
I think you get that.
I mean, the whole layering of this nervous system of the planet digitally will become a nervous system for the planet. So people, you know, how your nervous system, a knife, you touch your skin, ouch, you react, right? So if we can make geodesign really work, like the Singapore thing, every proposal, every action is immediately evaluated, and that information is available for everyone to see in advance. So is this the right thing or not? It's kind of the ultimate democracy where you have participation by everyone in understanding. So there's whole costs of externalities beyond economics or whatever start to disappear. That's a little bit of a lofty idea, but and we have our practical things that we have to consider, but imagine that every action that humans make of public consequences is understood in terms of its impacts.
Ultimate impact.
Ultimate impacts.
I mean, that, you know, organisms are always climbing this adaptive landscape. Okay, you can think of it as, you know, literally a topography. And that's what we call it, adaptive landscape. And what that means is with every generation, there's new adaptations. And those adaptations either bring you towards being well adapted or maladapted. And there's a trending over time that organisms in a place are becoming better and better adapted to that place. Now remember, what's really cool is that they're actually creating the place that they're becoming adapted to. But they climb up. They don't go down to maladapted very far before they are replaced by another organism. So that is climbing. And the key is that the criteria for success is rigorous, applied every time a decision is made, and it's very simple. Is it conducive to life or not? Right? If it's not conducive to life, and continuity of life, I should say,
right.
Not just life right now in this generation. So by putting the criteria, like you're putting, when you say, you can see it, and you can then decide whether or not to go ahead, if the standards are towards being well adapted, right, it is an evolutionary move that you're doing.
Yes, I believe this philosophically. There's few things I have at that level, but this is one of them, is that our work is about building a platform for evolution. And the key component of that, and I want to acknowledge Bill Miller if he's here, is a concept called Geo Accounting.
Okay, what's that?
It's accounting for everything that really matters.
Okay.
Because you're saying it with the words.
Yeah.
You want to be able to account for life.
All these
How do we
services.
measure all of the services? How do we organize all of the services into a geographic frame? Like this I do this here, it affects this in the watershed, or it affects this in the life cycle. In other words, a geoframe, not simply a money frame, but our friends in accounting, financial accounting, the Wall Street people have made the world really done extraordinary things. We've been able to leverage up money, like in the last 100 years. This has been amazing. And computational power in the financial accounting world has allowed us to globalize, to account for every little heartbeat of financial change that occurs in all of our companies and the whole economic ecosystem.
And yet we're surprised when we have toxins in our water.
So why can't
we're not accounting for that?
we have an accounting system that accounts for that and plays at the same level?
Right.
So if you say that's what happened in the late 1800s, accounting came into place that supported the big corporations growing, computational power made it go exponential with the internet, now globalization, all of that stuff is clear in my mind. Why can't we do the same thing for everything else other than money and set up the same kind of accounting framework or platform so that every human action is understood in terms of its implications? That's a big idea.
I know it.
Very, very big compared to our little practical dirt balls of existence of transactional work. But we need to have that context so that we're pushing towards it.
That's right.
And we've got the tools to do it.
I see.
You know, the cloud, the internet, all of that is going to enable it to occur. It's inevitable.
Have you ever worked with the guy from Puma, Joachim? The guy who's doing the ecological profit and loss statements?
I've read about them. No,
okay, so it's interesting because it kind of is marrying this accounting piece that you're talking about. So the EPL is a big company like Puma, and now Branson, Richard Branson, is having this thing. It's a B team. It's a bunch of CEOs who are going to buy off on this and also start to account for their environmental debt, right, which is ecosystem services. So they're starting to add all that up and going, eek, it takes this much water to make my shoes.
Sure.
But they're not yet. I'm like, well, what's on the profit side? And they're like, oh, well, I don't think we're producing any ecosystem services. So here's a place where, these multinationals, they don't think of themselves as place-based, but they have factories in different places. If you add up say you say to that factory, let's produce ecosystem services here, and then you get to add them up in your company. Then you move this kind of thing from a city to sort of a corporation. So there's a place, that's where accounting's starting to meet it.
What I want to get across is that you could add them up in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Nobody understands what the hell you're talking about. Oh, that's that ecosystem. If you put them onto a map, people get it quickly.
Right.
And particularly when you put them all on maps and you start to look at the relationships and patterns of those relative to ecosystems themselves.
Right.
Wow, I now have a framework where I can look at these relationships and patterns and processes in a frame that people can actually understand.
You know, and you're very close to almost being able to experience it too. It's true that the India project.
What do you mean by that experience?
Well, there's a story that actually turned that project, because when we were talking about ecological performance standards, that was kind of a esoteric idea. It was in metrics, and it was like, how do you tell this story? You don't tell it with a PowerPoint. So what we did was we went out and we were taking a tour with the design team on the land. We were taking a hike. And I lived sort of a magic life, because what happened was this 80-something-year-old botanist, Indian botanist, with a cane and his graduate student showed up, right?
Magical.
On this thing.
Magical.
And I went to him, and quietly I said, "Are there any sacred groves here in this 80,000 acres?" He said, "There's 4 of them." So a sacred grove is a place that was off limits because it was imbued with sacred qualities. It often had a spring on it. You know, it was a smart wildlife conservation move. And here's a place that had been destroyed for 400 years. So I said, "Do you know how to get there?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." So I didn't tell the tour guide, but I had him tell me when to turn. And we're taking this hike, and we turn into this invagination in the hill, and it's in there. And everybody is walking, and it's super dry. It was the dry season. And we're crunching along, and it's hot, dry, right? We're just dying. Everybody's talking to each other. You know how humans are on a hike, right? They're not paying attention at all. Except for the botanist, he was paying attention. And they're all talking and then we moved them into this sacred grove. Well, I started, and 15 degrees cooler, bird song, humidity, spongy ground. I mean, it was beautiful, and I thought, okay. So it was really interesting. I just went and I stood with my back against one of these giant trees. Here was an example of the moist deciduous forest. And everybody came up, and as they came in, they quieted down. They just went silent. It was like coming into a church. Right. It was, not because I was doing this. You don't have to.
I understand.
And then they formed a circle coming out from me like this. I was leaning against the tree, and they formed this circle, and just silent and smiling. And I said, "This is what it'll feel like to live in Lhasa." And then when I was talking about ecosystem services, that experience, that was worth so much. So this idea that as close as you can have a map tell that story, right? And actually encourage people to get out and see that last remnant, for instance, right? It's priceless for understanding sort of what we're sensorily, what we're hoping for.
Wow, this conversation could keep going, but we do need to take a break.
Okay.
Let's thank both Janine and Jack. Great conversation. Thank you both. That was great.